Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 170 for the 10th of Iyar in a leap year. So today we're going to be learning an entire chapter 47 of Likkutei Amarim, but it is a pretty short chapter, yet it is a very powerful chapter. And it is one that is really essential and crucial to understanding our purpose here in the world and how to maximize our life. So the subject of the chapter is really all about escaping limitations, escaping our perceptions of what we're capable of, our perceptions of the boundaries of our lives, of our bodies. And the way by which we're really going to explore this is through the incident that happened of leaving Egypt, of when God took us out of Egypt. And as we'll see, while the physical escape from Egypt was a historical one-time event, on a spiritual level and on a more psychological level, this aspect of leaving Egypt is something that we actually are called upon to experience and relive individually and on a daily basis. So I think the best way to go about this is actually to get straight into the text, and we'll explain as we go what this all means, what it means to leave Egypt, when it is that we are called upon to leave Egypt, and how we go about doing this. So here we go. So the Alter Rebbe begins this section by citing the Mishnah, and this is a very famous section of the Mishnah that might sound familiar to a lot of you. This is from Sachem, chapter 10, Mishnah 5, where it says, Bechol dor vador, uvechol yom vayom, chayav adam lirot atzmo, kilu hu yatsa hayom mitzrayim. So this actually comes up in the Haggadah of Pesach. We read this on the Haggadah as well. And it literally means in every generation and in every day, a person is obligated to see himself as if he himself left Egypt. And so then the Alter Rebbe explains, what does this mean? Because we know Egypt was like a one-time event. So what is it like? I personally, if I'm honest, I never visited Egypt before in my life. So how did I leave Egypt? How can I see myself as leaving Egypt? And the Alter Rebbe says, this is referring to the escape of the godly soul from the prison of the body, which is called the serpent's skin, which is how we referred to the body in the past in Tanya, if you remember. So it's what we're basically referring to is that the escape of so we've talked quite a bit about how the godly soul that we have is imprisoned inside of the body and it wants to get out. And so that imprisonment inside of the body is likened to the exile in Egypt. And getting out of Egypt is this escape of the godly soul from the body. And in escaping from the body, it will become one and unified with the Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, with the light of the infinite God, through being involved in Torah and mitzvahs in general, and in specific, in receiving and accepting the yoke of heaven in reading Shema. Why? So what is it about like the reading of the Shema? Because when we read the Shema, if you specifically look at the words of the Shema prayer that we say, at this time we're actually dedicating and we're accepting the yoke of heaven, and we're drawing into ourselves the unity of God in a very explicit way. So we say in the Shema, we say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is our God and God is one. So we're stating explicitly that God is our God and that God is one. So through this explicit kind of statement, this unifies us with God, and this causes our godly soul to somewhat escape from the body. And the Alter Rebbe says that we explained above the idea that when we say our God, Elokeinu, then this is referring to, which God are we referring to? We're referring to the God of Avraham, etc. And we know that Avraham actually did succeed in becoming totally unified with God, because how did he go about doing this? Because he was totally nullified, and he became encompassed in the unity of the infinite light of God. And we know that Avraham did this through his actions and through the fact that he really worked on himself to be able to really walk in the path of holiness from level to level. So it took Avraham a lot of work to be able to get to this level of being really unified with God. And the Alter Rebbe cites a verse to express this, and this is from Bereshit chapter 12, verse 9, where it says, "Ve'isa Avraham haloch v'nasoa v'gomer." That Avraham journeyed here and there. So he journeyed a lot. And this is referring not only to the physical journeys that he did, but this was actually the more spiritual journeys that Avram engaged in, where he was really progressing from level to level in terms of spirituality. And so for us, by contrast, we don't have to work as hard. So this unity that Avraham had to work so hard to achieve, we actually received it as an inheritance and as a gift. And this was given to us through the Torah. And God gave us this Torah. And within this Torah that God gave to us, he vested within it his will and his chokhmah. And God, as we've spoken about previously, his essence and his being are unified with perfect unity with this essence, with this will and with this chokhmah. And so thus, when we say that God gave us over the Torah, which is his will and wisdom, he's basically, so to speak, giving himself over to us. As is written in the Zohar, the Alter Rebbe cites here, where it says, where it explains on the pasuk. So there's a pasuk, this is from Shemot chapter 25, verse 2, where it says, "Veikhu li truma." So you should take for me an offering. So this is referring to the offering that we had to bring into the temple. So the Zohar actually explains this, and it says, when we say "Veikhu li truma," that you should take for me an offering, that what the Torah is actually trying to say is that you should take me as an offering, meaning take God as an offering. And the Zohar actually also explains that this me that it's referring to is not just God, but it's actually Torah. And so then it sounds as if it's two separate things. It's like that we should be taking God as an offering and Torah as an offering. So then the question comes up where it says, it should have said, you should have taken me and a truma. So utruma. And yet we see that the Zohar basically explains that they're one and the same, that God and his Torah are really one and the same. And the Alter Rebbe says that this should really be studied in depth, this idea, but the basic idea is basically that God and his Torah are really one and the same, and that you can't really separate the two. And then the Alter Rebbe here cites a few verses that come from the prayers that we have. This is, the first one comes from the prayer that we say on the festivals, and the second one is just the regular prayer that we say. So the first one is Vatiten lanu Hashem Elokeinu ba'ava chulei, that God, you have given us with love, etc. And the second one is Ki ve'olpa necha natata lanu Hashem Elokeinu chulei, that by the light of your countenance have you given us, O Lord our God. So the idea here that the Alter Rebbe is trying to bring out is this idea of how God really gave us the Torah as a gift. It's something that we don't have to work on. It's not this ability to tap into God, this ability to really unify with God was given to us as a gift. We don't have to work at it the way that Avraham had to work at it. And so thus, the Alter Rebbe explains, the only thing that can possibly hold us back from cleaving to God, from having our soul cleave to this light, to this blessed light of God, is our will. So if a person does not actually, God forbid, want to connect to God, then this can actually prevent them from connecting to God. But as soon as a person decides, and as soon as a person has the will and accepts upon themselves and draws into themselves this godliness and says to himself, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, God is our God, God is one, which is what we say during Shema, then on its own, your soul becomes unified with God. Because there's this idea of ruach aiti ruach ve'amshich ruach, that spirit evokes spirit and draws forth and bestows spirit. So basically what the Alter Rebbe is teaching us is it's not that difficult. Like, the default is for us to connect with God. All we need to do is just become aware of this unity that we can have with God. All we need to do is become aware of God. We need to just say, God is our God. God is one. And then it just happens. Then we become unified with God. But if we resist this, then that's a real thing. So if we decide that we don't want to have this unity with God, God forbid, then that's what's going to prevent us from having this. And so this idea of declaring the fact that God is our God and God is one, this is the aspect, says the Alter Rebbe, of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt. And so this is why specifically we see that when we recite the Shema, then the idea of leaving Egypt is brought up in it. So we should, like, when we say Shema, we talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim, we talk about leaving Egypt. And so even though the commandment, there's actually a separate commandment to remember leaving Egypt, this is something that we're also called upon to do, like its own separate thing. And it's not the same mitzvah as saying Shema. So this is talks about in the Gemara and in different statutes that are different in Jewish law, throughout Jewish law. So that there's two separate things. There's the fact that we have to remember leaving Egypt, and then there's the fact that we have to say Shema. But the Alter Rebbe says that in truth, they're actually the same thing. In truth, they're actually totally interconnected. That the idea of leaving Egypt and the idea of reciting the Shema, which is all about accepting God's unity and accepting the fact that God is our God, is really one and the same, because that is what leaving Egypt is this acceptance of God. And so then we see that actually at the end of the paragraph that has to do with Egypt, we finish that paragraph by saying, Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am the Lord your God. And this fits with what we've been talking about before, which is this whole idea that the idea of getting out of Egypt is the idea of accepting God, basically. So, and that this is how we unify with God. So this is the end of the section. So basically, just to recap, so the whole idea is that here we are, and we are all in Galus, unfortunately. Right now, we're in a state of exile. And this is so on a collective level, but it's also true in an individual level. And the way that it's true in an individual level is, as we've been discussing throughout the Tanya, is our godly soul is not at home. Our godly soul is inside of our bodies. It's in prison. It's trapped. It wants to get out. It's covered up by a lot of schmutz. It's covered up by the body. It's covered up by the animal soul and all these things that are not allowing it to express itself in its full way. And so when we talk about the idea that every single day we remember leaving Egypt and we want to see ourselves like Bechol Dor V'Dor Shehu Yatsa Mitzrayim, that we see ourselves as if we left Egypt, what this is it's not just a remembrance of a historical event that happened a long time ago. It's a remembrance of the fact that we have this ability right now, every single day, to leave our own personal exile, to redeem our godly soul out of this entrapment inside. And how do we do this? We do this through the Torah. And the most amazing thing about this is it's not actually something that we have to work so hard at. It's something that, yes, Avraham had to work really hard at. It's something that he had to really toil and devote his entire life to really uncovering God and discovering God and connecting with God and becoming one with God. But as a result of his efforts, we were actually given this ability as a gift. We were given Torah to us as a present. And so all we need to do is basically what the Alter Rebbe is explaining, is just accept this, is just to become aware, to give ourselves over to this process. And yes, there's a way to prevent this from happening, but that's only if we choose not to, only if we deny the existence of God or deny the process of God and his unity. But as long as we don't deny it, and as long as we just acknowledge it, as long as we declare that this is what we want and declare that this is who God is, then this process will naturally happen. And this is why, explains the Alter Rebbe, this specific time when we bring up this remembrance of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt, is specifically during the Shema, because it's during the Shema prayer that we declare that God is our God and that we declare that God is one, and alluding to this idea that we can really unify and become encompassed within God. So that is it for today. That is the end of the chapter 47. And tomorrow we will move on to chapter 48, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.